While 2021 might not have seemed as bad as 2020, that's not saying much. For starters, well, Joe Biden, aka someone described by Desert Coyote as
someone who can't finish a sentence, someone who was not the most popular candidate in the Democratic convention, someone whose vice president pick, through careful wording, essentially said in a DNC debate that she believed his accusers, someone whose son is currently under criminal investigation, someone a lot of people think is a creepy old pedophile with rape allegations, and who couldn't attract mold at his rallies if he left the bread out too long, someone who has been on record saying integrating black students would turn schools into racial jungles, with a running mate that saw more California black men sent to prison under her watch than anyone,
and Silent Rob described as
a child-sniffing man who can't even form two complete sentences in a row without fumbling all over himself and shitting his pants,
pulled off the heist of the century to climb the presidency even more than Bane in Payday 2's Endgame. Same can be said for that idiot Gavin Newsom. I could mention the disaster in Afghanistan and all the after effects of the still ongoing pandemic, the US's current failing administration and their fuck-ups, and how Isabella Loretta Jenk, the amalgamation of Ugly Betty and Penelope Taine, is a genuinely horrible woman who may or may not have coerced Chris Chan into doing unspeakable acts. But I'm sure my audience wants me to rant about smaller things compared to that, so here you go. Volition completely nuked Saints Row by pulling a DMC Devil May Cry and may not have not only just killed the franchise, but their company if this game bombs hard. Rockstar and Wardrum Studios botched what should have been an easy remaster with GTA The Trilogy Definitive Edition, which I'm using in air quotes, by making it look worse than the originals, while it's making them the only way to play 3, Vice City, and San Andreas without pirating the original games. The retro game market is still overcoming the crap caused by last year's spike, but not everything has balanced out yet. No Time to Die did for Daniel Craig's Bond what Die Another Day did for Pierce Brosnan's Bond. Halt the franchise. And unlike Brosnan, who had an excellent game to go out on as Bond, Craig doesn't even get that. Space Jam: A New Legacy was a somehow worse version of Ready Player One mixed with the original Space Jam. James Rolfe finally showed his true self in the behind-the-scenes video, affirming what the Cinemassacre truth has been going on about for some time. And this was before the whole Monster Madness plagiarism fiasco. And then episode 200 happened, which was a crummy-ass clip show. P.S. Rex Viper sucks. Netcon fucked Frogwares when they re-released The Sinking City on Steam without permission after the original license expired. Activision Blizzard got sued for all sorts of unspeakable acts, resulting in a bad workplace conduct. Subway kept delaying the roast beef re-release more than Concept delaying Mighty Number 9, but rest assured, it did eventually happen one way or another. And the relationship between WWE and 2K Sports has not been well, to say the least. Speaking of WWE, they continued those mass releases they were doing last year, hoping to bring in talented people? Nope, just almost mid-50s Goldberg and Eva fucking Marie. Yeah, nightmares. Though in the case of the latter, that was thankfully over as quickly as it started. At a time when AEW has been gaining momentum, especially by getting CM Punk back to wrestling, WWE somehow keeps getting worse, releasing Bray Wyatt, the top merch seller, squashing Bianca Belair at SummerSlam 2021 in 26 seconds, because Becky Lynch, the man, is back and is now a heel for some dumb reason, and more nonsensical booking. Oh, and killing the only thing that kept any fucking interest in this company. NXT just really irks me. That brand helped me out through some tough times, and for Vince and Co. to kill it like that just makes me sad. Also, we shall pay respects to those who are no longer with us as they passed away in 2021. Legendary director Richard Donner of Superman, Goonies, and Lethal Weapon fame, Rolling Stones drummer Charlie Watts, rappers Biz Markie and DMX, actors Clarence Williams III, Tanya Roberts, Jackie Mason, Samuel E. Wright, Christopher Plummer, Betty White, and legendary football coach/announcer John Madden, amongst many other famous people we lost. You will always be remembered. In spite of all the bad, there was still plenty of good that happened as well. Spider-Man No Way Home and Ghostbusters Afterlife, for example. And for me, of course, as always, completing more games. In short, even though plenty of these were, well, you'll see when we get to June, I still completed a decent amount of games off my list for 2021, and I'm pretty happy with what I did so. I beat plenty more new games, replayed some old favorites, and I even finished some games that I hadn't played in years. So, you know the drill by now. Let's go ahead and get into them, shall we? So January is normally the month where you try to cram in a bunch of stuff before you go back to school, but I only got 4 games in. And while I'd say they're mostly quality, yeah, one kind of fell short, but we'll get to that later. Let's focus on the first game of this lot that you're probably already seen right now on your screen, Bombastic. This is a puzzle game that is a part of a series of other puzzle games. You see, Bombastic here is a sequel to a PlayStation 1 game known as Devil Dice, which was developed by Shift. This game here is the sequel. And see, in Japan it's known as Xi, and the original game. And Go is what the sequel is known as in Japan. This was one of those games that Sony never bothered with, like, outside of Japan. Sony had this habit of, like, publishing games in Japan, but not publishing them in America, and this was one of them. Other games like Lifeline, Sky Gunner, and Ghost Hunter, I was going to say Monster Hunter, but Ghost Hunter are all examples. For this one here, Bombastic, it was picked up by Capcom. This is a very unique puzzle game, basically, as you're basically moving these dice around, which are controlled by this family of small devils. You have this kind of isometric perspective and has 7 standard 6-sided die. You can basically move them around in various different ways, and you have to move them from point A to point B through this puzzle, these universes here. It also does throw some other crazy stuff in there. It's very weird and crazy. I don't even know if I can fully begin to explain it, because it's Japanese and it's weird. So you can throw this one into the weird PlayStation 2 game category. It's a pretty enjoyable game if you enjoy these kinds of puzzle games. There are other modes in it as well. And if you played the previous game, you'll probably enjoy this. If you didn't, this one isn't too bad to get into, and I probably would call this one a bit of a dare I say, hidden gem. Oh, I said the dreaded word, Metal Jesus comes a-running. No. Thankfully, it's not too expensive. I got my copy for probably a little under 10. I'm seeing price charting as being it listed as 10, and that's what it's selling for, 15 at most, so yeah. Maybe give it a go, actually, if it's your type, if you like puzzle games, because it's pretty unique. Next game we move on to is Burnout Revenge. Now, Burnout Revenge is one I've wanted to go back and beat for a long time. I didn't even realize it, but yeah, this is one I played years ago. I never fully beat, but this time I was determined to beat it after wanting to get a physical copy on the 360, because it's the best version of the game. Anyways, I ended up going and 100%ed the whole damn game, unlocked everything offline, and yeah. Sadly, the only thing that's missing are the online achievements, but I got all the offline achievements, and that's like 24 out of 36, and you get a good amount of gamer score. Burnout Revenge I want to talk about separately, as I do want to the rest of the series, because it's a very good series, and I have way more to say than I can probably fit in this video. What I will say is that Revenge was already an excellent setup from Burnout 3, makes a few little tweaks to make it its own thing of sorts, and it pretty much creates a game that, while still somewhat feeling a bit different from the previous game, is still just as fun, if not actually better in my personal opinion, and the best game out of the entire franchise. Looks, plays, sounds amazing, kick-ass soundtrack, all the usual hallmarks. I love Burnout Revenge, and it actually made me go back and 100% Burnout 3 for real, so yeah. Thanks for that. Moving on into the next territory, this was a game here that I played on Twitch. I didn't do too many games on Twitch because I was still binging Alias and using the Twitch watch party function at the time. So I didn't play much, but I did play this one eventually. It is Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. This is another game that was made by the Collective in the same vein as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, only with an Indiana Jones skin. It's a bit longer than that game in some regards. Some of the levels feel more longer. It doesn't feel quite as smooth because of some of the other platforming stuff. It's a bit more tricky. Some of the combat, it's a bit more frustrating than Buffy. There is still some enjoyability out of it, especially if you're an Indiana Jones fan. The plot is that it basically acts as a bridging gap between, like, the first movie. It happens before, like, the start of the second movie, Temple of Doom. And it feels very much in vain, like you would expect a full-bore indie film, even though it's just like a smaller subplot, like a small stone into the actual film that this precedes. But I do think this is I think it's a good game on the whole, but it does have some problems a bit. You can get this on Steam for like $6, and you'll get more than enough hours of gameplay out of it. It's way more heavy platforming, though, than, say, Buffy. So, yeah. Finally, the last game I ended up beating for the month of January was Contract Jack. Last year, I beat the 2 No One Lives Forever games, and this was the one that I had never bothered to play. This one is a spin-off in the franchise, focusing on an entirely different character, known as John Jack, Jack standing for just another contract killer, who's basically hired by the organization Harm from the mainline series of Nulf games to help them fend off another rival organization known as Danger. Spin-offs can be fun, but alas, this is TIE Fighter, this is really not, as Kim Justice said. It's a way more action-oriented focused game than the Nulf franchise, which has more emphasis on stealth gameplay and stuff like that. It really just feels more like a generic first-person shooter. There's little to no involvement from Kate Archer in Unity. You see her in a cameo in one area, but it's a really inconsequential one that doesn't make any sense. It's just there for fan service and some other posters as well as the appearance of other characters from the mainline Nulf games. But by and large, it's a pretty generic first-person shooter that you can probably beat in an afternoon if you know what you're doing. Unless you're a die-hard Nulf fan who wants more lore, and even then there really isn't much of it here, I would probably suggest you pass on this one altogether. Yeah. Let's just go to the next month and see if we can end it on a higher note there. February, the month of love, and that's where it finally actually struck me, but let's talk about we'll talk about that when we get to said specific game. First, I had some other unfinished business that was waning in from January in the form of Alan Wake. Considering this is one of the Remedy games of what many people would be considered to be one of their best games, and one that I had never played for many years, and I had this for a while because of a Steam sale where it was $3, I figured might as well go ahead and give it a play. And I have to say, this is a pretty interesting game. It certainly is pretty unique as hell with its setting. It's very much inspired by a lot of Stephen King stuff and Twin Peaks as well. So the setting there is pretty unique, and its gameplay is it's kind of falls in that sort of basic third-person shooter realm, but it has its own unique elements like light and darkness as well. It has a very unique story, basically, of our titular hero, who's a writer, who goes up to this mysterious town, basically, trying to write, basically, the next set of his book. Having kind of trouble, though, kind of like a Secret Window. And, yeah, but then, all of a sudden, weird things kind of start happening, and then he's got to investigate this, find his wife and all, and just, it's crazy, crazy weird. I'd say, despite a few frustrating bits in there, maybe more than a few, it is a pretty damn good game. Sadly, I will not be playing the sequel because I refuse to support Epic Games and their crap, basically. That's also why I'm not bothering with the remaster, because again, I refuse to support them, and they want to basically, well, I should actually correct myself and say Remedy Entertainment wants to sell their souls to Epic Games, but you know what? This means I can just go play more from my backlog to knock out. And trust me, there's still a decent amount, but still, Alan Wake didn't even go on sale in the last winter Steam sale, actually, so yeah, take that for what you will, even if it's still a good game. Okay, so here's the deal with this next game. Like I said, the month of love is February, and well, lo and behold, it happened to me. Yes, I finally fell in love, and It kind of hit me when I least expected, and as soon as I realized that, the first thing that was playing in my head was the Metal Gear Solid alert music. Alert sound, the music, and the alarms blaring because it's actually happening. Yes, yours truly is in love. And so I figured, why not actually play Metal Gear Solid? I've been wanting to knock this off my backlog thanks to having the Legacy Collection, but never really bothered to until now. Except I decided not to do the original game. Oh, no. Yours truly decided to do the Twin Snakes remake that came out on the GameCube, and well, this may or may not have been the best of idea for a multitude of reasons. If you know anything about the Twin Snakes, and if you're watching this and you don't, let me try and break it down. From what I've read and researched, the Twin Snakes makes plenty of aesthetical changes to the original Metal Gear Solid. All the voices are re-recorded, basically. There are some other minor changes in how the cutscenes play out, more akin to Metal Gear Solid 2, and other things like that. Sadly for some, it actually does ruin a bit of the experience, as things like the music are changed as well in some places, and it really doesn't sound as good compared to the original score's soundtrack, and there's no way to switch it back. There's plenty of other bonus content, though, and other things that I think technically, on a technical level, would make it a superior game to the original, which is probably a controversial statement, but from an aesthetic standpoint, I can see why it really doesn't work too much. You probably already know the story anyways. This was my first time playing this. Admittedly, this is a very bizarre game, and yes, I know, I'm 24 years old and it took me this long to play Metal Gear Solid. I don't care, really. I just never had the chance to get into it proper. One, because I was technically too young for it came out, and even when I got older, I don't know what happened, okay? But please play Metal Gear Solid 1 in some way, shape, or form, regardless of how you do it. Some people might irk you, but I probably won't, because I can't be bothered to. Anyways, this one afterwards, to cool down from the insanity of MGS, I went ahead and replayed Space Channel 5 Part 2, because I had it on Steam. I had played it before on the 360 through the Dreamcast collection, and I thought replaying it here would be good, but kinda sorta not. First of all, trying to basically get the game working with the right frame rate is a pain, because this game, if you know Space Channel 5, and if you know what it is, and if you don't, well, it's basically this part, like a mix between a rhythm game and Simon Says, and yeah, that's basically the gist of it in a nutshell. It has this weird, unique space theme. It was another one of Sega's well-known properties, started on the Dreamcast, and yeah. Sadly, Part 2, I feel like, ended up becoming more frustrating than I remember. The trial and error nature often leads to some very frustrating moments, and it really does rely more on memorization, which is not really ideal. It's like you have to watch the game or look up a guide to understand what you're doing before you even go and bother playing it. There is some fun to be had with it, but it can be a frustrating experience, so please yield caution. Next game I was playing, I actually beat on the Day of Love in the month of love, was a PS2 game that I had been wanting to play for a while. It was playing through for a bit, but still taking me a while to get through. Raw Danger. This is the sequel to Disaster Report, which I beat in 2019, and only then did I beat the sequel. I had to say, Raw Danger I probably think is better than the original game in some regards, as it's more expansive, has more content, still packs a lot of the same intense craziness, and does keep a lot of what made the first game good, but it is a bit more where the hell do you go when all is said and done, and it does seem to feel a bit more unstable than the first game, with more frame rate drops and running at lower frame rates at times when the action gets intense. I do want to talk about this one and the previous game separately, because I do think they're pretty unique games, so I won't waste too much time here, but if you want a unique horror game where Mother Nature is your enemy, play Disaster Report and Raw Danger. This next game was actually a short one on Twitch, but one I had to pull out of all of a sudden out of nowhere. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2. I played the first one in my spare time many years ago, but I never played the sequel until recently. Admittedly, this was on a whim because of the Gina Carano fiasco that was happening at the time, it was on my mind, and a lot of other stuff was, so I kind of wanted an excuse to rant on Twitch about all the madness that has gone wrong with Disney Star Wars, and I thought playing this game would be a simpler one rather than trying to play something like KOTOR or KOTOR 2. Anyways, The Force Unleashed 2, it's pretty much like this first game, maybe a tad bit easier if you know what you're doing here, if you've already played the first, because you'll know what you're doing. And lo and behold, it's a pretty simple action game, but still had a pretty interesting story, continuing the story of, well, the sort of apprentice Vader had from the first game, now looking to get revenge basically on him here for sort of betraying-ish stuff. Yeah, you do a lot of Force things, you do Jedi things, lightsaber attacking, Force abilities, all that good stuff. It's a simple game, but it is a fun one. Both of them are, basically, and I would suggest you play them if you haven't already. Next game, actually, is none other than Aero Elite Combat Academy. This is a flight-based game in the vein of games like Ace Combat, but it's actually very different from Ace Combat, because the thing is, Aero Elite basically is more of a realistic kind of flight game. Like, the planes don't easily turn on a whim. You really have to be careful. It feels very more sim-like oriented at times. On top of that, it's not a dedicated single-player-like game. There is a campaign mode in it, but it's very short and you can finish it in an afternoon. No, the real deal about this here is basically flying the other planes in sort of the sim mode, basically, where you can take an actual plane, fly it close as possible, and do other sorts of missions and other things there. Basically, if you're expecting something like Ace Combat, don't actually go in expecting that. You might want to tamper your expectations just a bit. If you want a more different kind of game that will let you fly other different types of craft, in addition to the other stuff here, like helicopters and other stuff, you might want to give it a go, but it is a bit sluggish around the edge, so please be warned. It's not as smooth as Ace Combat. Last game to talk about for the month of February, continuing the Metal Gear train, was Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. This game was developed by Platinum Games and is a spin-off of the main Metal Gear. It's more of a hack and slash. It takes place within the same universe, but it's many, many years into the future. And, yeah, it was a bit tougher than I was expecting, especially on normal. Should have just played on easy, because that game doesn't F around. There's also a lot of context-sensitive things that it requires, and it made me realize some of the stuff and the problems on Twitch. My 360 controller was just not cutting it, basically. So I'm actually getting a different controller, an Xbox One controller. I already have the adapter anyways, along with a play-in charge kit. I got a gift card for Christmas, so I was able to get that stuff from Microsoft Store, and hopefully it'll get here tomorrow. Today's the January 3rd, 2022 when I'm recording this. Tomorrow will be the 4th. Hopefully it gets there then. But otherwise, frustrations aside, it's a pretty unique game. So, yeah. And you don't really need to have any major knowledge of Metal Gear, which is a plus. So March, business really picked up in terms of games being beat. I beat a decent variety of stuff, and yeah, let's get into it. Starting with Batman: The Enemy Within. This is the last of the Batman Telltale games I hadn't played, and one of the only Telltale games left I hadn't played. This isn't the first one we've encountered, basically, in 2021 that I needed to knock off my list, and it won't be the last. There will be another one later on. But as for this one here, Enemy Within itself, I do think it is a bit of a step up from the original game, even if there was one stinking bit failing me because my mouse decided to fail me, and at that point I had to go force my controller in. But yeah, other than that, the game was fine. I do think it takes some serious risk with the story, killing off certain characters and allowing you to salvage the relationship with Catwoman should you fail to do it properly the first time like I did. Yeah, that was eating me up for years, but now I got to cross that off the list here, or resalvage that as Revenge, and I guess I'm pretty happy with that on the whole. Fine game, but it's not too much different from your other Telltale games, although I would say it probably is one of the better ones looking back. Next up was Air Force Delta Strike. Since I was looking for more of a Ace Combat-like game, I went ahead and got this. And this one is definitely more of what I was expecting for an Ace Combat style game. This game is the last entry in the Air Force Delta series, which was done by Konami as sort of their Ace Combat. Delta Strike tries to change things up a bit by using an anime-esque theme for like some of the lower rank, for some of the character models, like when you're talking about dialogue and stuff. And it actually does more than just your standard Ace Combat fare, as eventually you do end up going to space, and yeah, it's crazy. The game feels very active with a lot of the crazy voiceover going on here throughout the gameplay as you're firing off. Like every time someone fires off, you'll hear Fox 2 by Anaconda, whatever, and just, yeah, or something like that. And you get enough of that, it kind of becomes tiring after a while. But other than that, the game is fine. It's your standard Ace Combat fare, but like I said, also part space as well. It does have branching paths, which can help determine which missions you do, and even multiple endings as well in the game. So, yeah, there is some replayability of it, and it is a pretty interesting game. It's not too expensive, and if you want more flight combat goodness, I guess you could do worse. Next up, I never actually had properly beaten this game. I had played it in the past, but never beat it, and with this cancelled Xbox Live Arcade version, 360 that is, getting leaked, I thought, why not then would be a good time to go and play GoldenEye 007 and fully attempt to beat it for the first time. Unfortunately, I do think the game has fallen prey to some elements of time. While I do think the remaster that came out, or would have come out, would have been the best way to play it, it still doesn't fix a lot of the other problems with some of the game. There's some really frustrating levels in it, like when you're breaking out of that prison, basically, and you really have to stealth things up. It actually forced me to drop the game to easy just to go and properly beat it in the end. Yeah, that wasn't very fun at all. And on top of that, there are still some other things in it as well. Some of the toughness of it and all, and just, I feel like the concept of it was eventually perfected in some of the later games. And like, I never fully beat Perfect Dark. I should probably go back and beat the original at some point. Maybe I'll do that this year. I don't know. But ultimately, yeah, I don't know. I still like the game, but I'm not sure it's quite aged up. For its time, as a console FPS, it was pretty good, considering there was really not much else like it on the market. But as other console FPS games like Medal of Honor and Halo came along, they kind of started to blow GoldenEye out of the water. Even Rare's own Perfect Dark seemingly took a bite out of it. Whatever, we'll see. And the sad thing is I finished Perfect Dark 0, but not the original Perfect Dark. Yeah, I know. Things happen. Anyways, the next game I beat was Ghostbusters the video game. Another one I hadn't played in about 5 or so years. I bought this when it was still on Steam during the whole Ghostbusters 2016 fiasco. Played a bit of it. Never really beat it, though. Eventually, I ended up going back and beating it in March. Mid-March, I should say. Like, right to the 15th. Because I wanted to finish it. Because the thing is, I knew I was going to play the remastered version when it came to Steam eventually. Later in 2021 in October for Halloween month. So I'll talk more about the game when we get to there. But what I will say is that this is a pretty solid game that, on the whole, is very respectful to the Ghostbusters lore and provides an excellent bridging gap between, well, Ghostbusters 2 and then eventually what would be Afterlife, even though some things were kind of ruled out as non-canon, but that's not here or now. Oh boy, this next one. Boy, this one. Stubbs the Zombie and Rebel Without a Pulse. I can't tell you how happy I was when I heard that this game was getting a re-release on modern platforms. The thing about Stubbs is that, well, The game originally came out on the original Xbox way back in 2005, and also came out on, well, PC and Mac OS X. Sadly, though, the game itself got lost to time, basically. There was a sequel plan, but Wide Load was closed in 2014, and, well, it got canceled, which sucks. So, but here, finally, after having the game gone away from digital storefronts for a while, it was pulled off of Steam for unknown reasons, possibly because Wide Load, the developer, was acquired by Disney, and that caused a whole bevy of rights issues. And it was also pulled off the Xbox Originals Marketplace due to technical issues. The game kind of became a bit hard to find for a while. And in fact, Xbox copies are still roaming around $55 or so. In fact, even in the early 2010s, it was hovering around that $30 price point, with it barely dipping to $22 back in November of 2013 for a complete copy. At the height of the pandemic crap, the game was still going for like over $100 and like $112 in October of 2020. Thankfully, due to the advent of this re-release, which you can buy for $20 on Steam, yes, they did bring it back there. And on top of that, you can also get it on Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X/S consoles. I do want to do a separate video about this game because I think it's a pretty unique one. But all I'll say is that this is genuinely one of the funniest games I have ever outright played. It takes an already existing engine, the Halo engine, transitions things to third person, adds some unique flair to it, is a very interesting twist on the zombie genre. And like I just said, straight up, no lie, this is like one of the funniest games I've ever played. I would genuinely put this one like in my top 5 funniest games ever. And there's some funny shit that I've played, like God Hand, the South Park Stick of Truth, this. There's probably other stuff I'm thinking of as well, like the No One Lives Forever games as well. There's plenty of other stuff, but genuinely, this one is. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. All I'm going to tell you right now is go play this game. That is all. Next up, after doing that Goldeneye experiment, I wanted to play another Xbox Live game that actually did get released, but I missed out on back in the day. Snoopy Flying Ace. I'm a die-hard Peanuts fan, those of you who know me, so I figured this game would be right up my alley, and while having some more frustrating parts, I do think it is a pretty solid, fun flight game that, while not too long at least, can be like, if you go on the harder difficulty, it can be a bit much, but genuinely, if you like games like Crimson Skies, High Road to Revenge, you'll probably enjoy this one more than likely as well. It's got an excellent theming to it with the Peanuts license, simple story to understand, kind of simple compared to other games like Ace Combat and even the aforementioned already mentioned earlier this month beaten Air Force Delta Strike. But if you want a little bit more simple version of those games, this is probably what you're looking for. It is actually the sequel to Snoopy vs. the Red Baron, which came out on PC and PS2, so that's one's easier to get, but if you got a decent enough PC, it's really worth emulating Flying Ace, as it is a very enjoyable game. Next up on the list was Ground Zero Texas. I have always had this fascination for FMV games, and yeah, I've just always found them very unique per se, especially the ones made by American Laser Games, and eventually my interest led me towards digital pictures, and this game here, Ground Zero Texas Nuclear Edition. This is a re-release version of a full-motion light gun game that came out on the Sega CD back in 1993. Once again, the fine swine over at Screaming Villains have taken it upon themselves to take this game, remaster it, and re-release it on modern platforms. And while the game itself is still fine for what it is, unfortunately, it was not entirely a smooth ride. There was actually some serious technical issues with this one. And when I say serious technical issues, I mean dead serious. Like, the main issues is that the game basically, well, some of the hitboxes are broken. So, like, when you try and shoot an enemy, nothing happens. It doesn't happen, and, well, you don't register the enemy, you lose life easily, and you go down, you game over fast. Needless to say, this has been a major problem that plagued just this particular re-release, but it's plagued the game ever since it come out. And crazy enough, Screaming Villains themselves have actually gone seriously silent, actually. They actually seriously have gone silent on all of this, which kind of worries me a little bit. Not only because this is not fixed, and this is a major issue with the game, actually, but it also makes me worried that they're not going to re-release other ones as well. Because a lot of people want more digital pictures games like Sewer Shark release. Look, Ground Zero Texas is fine, but you might want to beware if you buy the re-release because of this bug. Trust me, I ended up getting the bad ending the first time, and I'm still damn traumatized by this shit. That and the hitboxes still haven't been broken, so I haven't revisited it since. I'd like to, but until they fix it, I can't in good conscience. And the last game I beat for March, another shorty, but this one, thankfully, without much issue, was the Panzer Dragoon Remake. Now, I always had my eye on this one, but I never had a chance to get it at launch because of its price. Eventually, I bought it due to a Steam sale, and well, this game is actually still pretty damn good. I mean, from what little I played of the original Panzer Dragoon in Orta, because you can unlock the original in Orta, the third game, or the fourth game, I should say, because you have 1, 2, Saga, then Orta. Genuinely, Panzer Dragoon Remake updates the original game pretty damn faithfully. It looks even better than the original. It plays pretty much to a T right on. And I do think the game itself still holds up, actually, and is definitely something you should play, especially if you missed out on the original Panzer Dragoon. I'm glad I actually did play this one, because although I didn't play much of the original game for very long in Orta, this remake actually does a really good job of updating it, honestly. And I am looking forward to the sequel to the remake, basically, that is coming out, because the second game, Zwei, is also getting remake, actually, courtesy of Megapixel Studios under license from Sega, the same team who did this remake. So play this remake, and yeah. April was less of a busy month because, well, schoolwork was picking up, because end of semester, when it starts to get to that point, things really pick up like that. That and WrestleMania was 2 nights, so I had to try. So I didn't beat much for this month, but I still beat some quality. Just about 5 games. Well, mostly, but let's just get into it. Starting with Metro 2033 Redux, which bloomed over from March. I had both of the Metro Redux games sitting in my backlog for a while, but never got around to playing them for like 6 years until now. Oh, don't mind that there. Anyways, Metro itself was based off a book, and it takes place in this sort of post-apocalyptic Russia, and you're like part of this resistance as well here. You're hiding after a global nuclear holocaust. It's an insane, crazy thing. Again, I can't even begin to explain it. The novels were done in the early 2000s. However, the game, like the first novel, was only brought over in English with the advent of this game here. It's part first-person shooter, part horror as well, because of the setting as well. It's your standard kind of first-person shooter, but it's a pretty interesting game. You fight both humans and mutants. You've got your standard set of guns, and other unique stuff like crossbows as well. There's plenty of strategy to it as well. You can use stealth, even if it doesn't feel ideal at times. Ultimately, I do think this is a pretty good game as well. It has a unique setting to it. It plays super damn well, actually. And if you've not played any of the Metro games, start here with 2033 and work your way up to last Redux, or Metro Exodus. I was about to get to Last Light, but since I just mentioned Last Light now, let's talk about Metro Last Light. Last Light itself, Redux, picks up again where the first game left off, and these Redux re-releases are enhanced versions of the originals, so they are the definitive versions to play. But Last Light genuinely follows up where the first one left off as well here. And we must, again, venture towards more different parts as well of Moscow Metro after the nuclear holocaust. There are plenty of improvements on this one as well, and you even have new functions like weapon customization as well. There are some more insane, crazy bits with this game, but ultimately, Metro Last Light is a pretty solid fall. There's really not much I can say, considering it's basically like the first, but there are plenty of improvements as well into the game. Like, again, the atmosphere is still pretty good as well, like the first, and adding upgrades to your weapons are like a very nice things as well, or customization, I mean, rather, not just upgrades, but customization, and a whole bunch of other interesting stuff. Not to mention, actually, I just think it's a better game narratively than 2033. I still like 2033, but I like Last Light a lot more. I've not played Exodus, but I will probably be playing that in my spare time because it's a beast of a game. That, and I already have enough other stuff on the backlog, so yeah, but I'll get to, maybe I'll get to Metro Exodus one day. We'll see. Anyways, next up, back to the console grind, Naruto Ultimate Ninja. Naruto Ultimate Ninja was the first in a long-running series of fighting games that have had eventually many more spin-offs and successors, including the Ultimate Ninja Storm series, which is all still going on to this day, miraculously. So when it came to Naruto fighting games, this is really probably where the gist of it all started, basically. This is what you had if you had a Sony console. If you had Nintendo, you had Clash of Ninja. But for the Sony people, it was this. This was actually my first time getting into the Ultimate Ninja line of Naruto games. I previously played the Clash of Ninja games, or at least Clash of Ninja Revolution, and maybe some other stuff, but never had a chance to play this one. And well, it's kind of a little rough around the edges, actually. I would like to talk about these in a separate video, so I won't go into too much detail here, but while I do think the groundwork itself was laid out nicely for future games and other future Naruto fighters like it, there still had some clunkiness in it and a little ways to go. The mission mode especially could be frustrating. It will take you a while to get through it. Yeah, but fortunately, I did get through it, and it was fine. Anyways, and that's really all. Now, this is kind of a more shorter form game, but during Sega's 30th anniversary, or not 30th, their 60th anniversary, they were giving away some oddities on Steam as well. Not even necessarily fuller, smaller games, but oddities like Golden Axe, a canceled prototype, basically. This is probably one of the more weird things I played, and this isn't the first. There was a couple others I had. But what this basically was a previously unseen build of the canceled game Golden Axe Reborn. And it looked to be like an interesting kind of 2.5D beat 'em up, but ultimately there's really not much to it. It was just a shorter demo, basically, and yeah, I do think had this game fully come out, had more time in the oven, it definitely would have been one to actually really play, might I add. So yeah, there's really not much more. Simple 2.5D beat 'em up. Had that Golden Axe look to it as well, so yeah. If you still want to play it but missed out on it, there's a way to do it. Just check the PC Gaming Wiki article for Golden Axed. And that's AXED, by the way. Final game we beat for the month of April was Star Wars The Clone Wars. This was a 2002 game that was developed by Pandemic, the first of several Star Wars games that Pandemic would do. But this game here, again, I want to talk about it separately. But what I'll say is, this game feels very more like a tech demo of what Pandemic would later do compared to some of their other games. Like, there's really not much more meat on the bones. It's a basic linear kind of game. It starts with the Battle of Geonosis from Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and basically kind of goes from there. Also has some other side stuff, but genuinely, it's only really a decent game from what I played. there are some even more other frustrating bits later on if you're playing still on a higher difficulty level. And ultimately, the game really doesn't pack much. Like, if you played this before you played Battlefront, you probably would have liked it fine enough back in the day. But since the opposite was for me, I never actually had a chance to go and properly appreciate this at the time, because me and my cousins, we were just enamored with the Battlefront games and KOTOR and all that good shit. So, yeah, decent game, but get it for a cheap price. The month of May always brings the busiest one way or another. Between once you fully are out for the semester here in college or whatever, and you want to play more games, well, this is where it goes crazy. And this also, towards the end of the month, slips into the major crazy shit that happened, but we'll get to that when we get to that. First, let's talk about the first game I beat for the month, right on the dot of May 1st, as it boiled over from April. Mission Impossible Operation Surma. This was an action game of sorts that is set in the Mission Impossible universe, rather the film universe itself. This is another one I could talk about separately, but it takes place between Mission Impossible 2 and Mission Impossible 3. It was developed by Paradigm Entertainment and published by Atari. It came out on PS2, GameCube, and Xbox in late 2003. Well, Xbox and GameCube in late 2000, or Xbox and PS2 in late 2003, if I could speak right, and it was early 2004 for the GameCube port. This is a pretty decent action game. It really doesn't stand out much from other action games other than having the Mission Impossible license, as well as having a couple actors reprise their roles from the film. Not Tom Cruise, though, because he'd be way too expensive. No, but rather at least Ving Rhames and John Polson reprise the roles of Luther Stickle and Billy Bayard from Mission Impossible 2 respectively, amongst a whole host of other original characters that are brought in for this adventure that, well, Ethan Hunt goes on. There are some more ridiculous bits that you may be spending more time on and will make you thankful that if you end up playing the game in an emulator like I did, just for streaming's sake, you will be thankful that you played it in an emulator, trust me. It tends to blur the line between stealth and action a bit, but I don't know if it really mixes it all too well, per se. Whoop, sorry about that. But I don't know if it mixes it all that well in the end, but ultimately it is a pretty interesting one, but only if you really get the license. If you take away the license, by and large, you have a pretty generic action game on the whole itself. If you find it for cheap, though, at your local retro game store or at a convention, maybe give it a whirl. I probably didn't pay very much for this game. In fact, I got it when I got the Star Wars Clone Wars Tetris Worlds bundle, and both ended up being around $10 total, so yeah, maybe if you can get it in a situation like that, it's worth it, or if you're a diehard Mission Impossible fan. Otherwise, you might want to stay away. Now, 6 days later, I ended up beating Naruto Ultimate Ninja 2. Ultimate Ninja 2, I got at the same convention I got Ultimate Ninja 1 from a different seller, but got it for at least a really good price. And while I do think Ultimate Ninja 2 fixes up some of the issues with Ultimate Ninja 1, it's still a bit rough around the edges, and there is some serious OP shit. Like, when you start first time you fight Itachi, you're gonna get your ass whooped, and at that point, you might as well just turn on Codebreaker or Action Replay, because it's not even worth it dealing with the rest of this trouble, honestly. Still, though, it does have a bigger roster, follows more of the story itself, and has some more intense bits, and may not take you as long to get through, but it's still an insane game, so yeah. Again, I'd like to talk about the Ultimate Ninja game separately at one point or another. Next up is Family Guy the video game. Now, since I went and already played Simpsons Hit and Run on Twitch, I figured why not play this one. Getting an Xbox copy of it, though, was kind of a pain in the ass, as it was, oh god, it still is going to that $20 point. The PS2 version is running around $16, but it seems like the game is only getting more pricier on the Xbox, despite not being backwards compatible with the Xbox One, and probably won't be, given all the licensing troubles. I already talked about this one separately in a full bore review, so please go and watch that when you're done here, or pause this, go watch that review, then come back and finish this video. But to recap, it is a decent game that, while it has a mix of styles, some have more problems than other. Some of it can get pretty more tedious on the whole, and I'd really reserve this one only for the die-hard fans of Family Guy, especially if you're a fan of any of the earlier seasons, as this game came out when the show had recently come back from cancellation. Ultimately, though, I would probably reserve it for those people, and everyone else, you may want to hold off or try to get it for cheaper. Okay, this next one is not really a newish game, but let me explain what happened with this one. This is Evergrace on the PlayStation 2. I had bought this game in 2019 and attempted to play through it over the summer. Of that year. However, towards the end, what ended up happening was my save data got corrupted, basically, and I could not load it for whatever reason. It didn't even show up as corrupted in the PlayStation 2 menu, but what happened was I failed to beat the game proper in time. It just would not save, could not load my save, and I just declared the game a lost cause. Well, 2 years after, or shall I say 1.5 years after that debacle, I could not suddenly accept this defeat, and I said fuck it, and decided to get my revenge on this game by doing a proper running of it. And well, I don't think my opinion has changed that much on this game. It's really kind of soured a bit more, having to get my revenge on it, and only highlighting more of its shortcomings. Given that this was a launch title for the PlayStation 2, I guess there is still some technical merits, but it really was not one of the better launch titles you'll find on the PlayStation 2, truth be told. I heard that the prequel to this game, Forever Kingdom, is a better game, and I'd like to get a hold of it and play it at some point, but it's too fucking expensive! $109 for a complete in-box copy as of January 4th, 2020. That's just beautiful. And many people say this is the better game. You sons of bitches! Seriously, I don't even know if Metal Jesus actually hidden gem this game, but it's just way too fucking expensive. And how much even is the original game going for? Jesus, 20 bucks? I'm pretty sure I got it for like half that, and I still feel like I paid too much. Yeah, unless you've exhausted your options for PlayStation RPGs, do yourself a favor and maybe stay away from it. Oh god, and speaking of something to stay away from, I had a huge bundle of Winged Cloud visual novels that I had not touched. And this was the first of many ones that I had not even... Yeah, you know what? We'll just address them all when we get to them. But we're starting with Sakura Fox Adventure. Fox Adventure, well, it basically follows the same template as all these other ones. Something something Yuri, something something fetish, something something sexy sex if you patch it. And yeah, that's kind of the gist of all of them in a nutshell, really. But let me just read you the Steam store description. Mikoto is a fox girl and the future head of her clan. One night she runs away from home to attend a festival at a human village, and there she meets and falls in love with a beautiful female knight. Sound interesting to you? Well, there's really not much gameplay to it, actually. Like, at all. Like, little to no gameplay. In fact, you probably will be wanting to just speed run it more often than not if you're just desperate for sexy sex. Or better yet, you can just go and look up the guide separately, because the slides themselves have been posted separately, and honestly, don't even pay the full money. At this point, I feel like for me, buying these is more for the trading cards and the Steam leveling and the achievement perfect getting, and because it's really rather simple to just speed run it all and get everything at the end of the day when all said and okay, that's enough. Now let's talk about an actual game for a change that still roots itself too much in its own story, but is an immense experience in itself. Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance. Oh boy. What can I say about this game that hasn't already been said? I know, 24, only playing the first 2 Metal Gears, what can I do? But yeah, Substance is a pretty solid upgrade of the original game, which was itself an intense experience. And even though it feels like a more bait and switch and takes some crazy other approach, the actual story itself and a lot of the dialogue does lead you to think about a lot of different things as well. It does fix some of the gameplay hiccups with Metal Gear Solid 1 and is probably aged better, but still could also benefit perhaps from some kind of remake, especially the top-down isometric perspective of everything at times, because truth be told, I've never really been a fan of that whatsoever. So probably when I get to Metal Gear 3, Gear Solid 3 and onwards, I'm probably going to have a better time there either way, so yeah. But still, I really enjoyed Metal Gear Solid 2. I'd say I like it even more than the first, and genuinely, you should probably play this at one point if you haven't already. Excuse me. Next game is Metal Slug XX. This is one of the only Metal Slug games I never properly beat, and I had this sitting on my Steam backlog for a while, but never bothered to beat it until very, very, very recently. Metal Slug XX, much in the same vein as what Metal Slug X was to Metal Slug 2, a proper upgrade of the game that fixed some issues with it and all. Metal Slug XX is an upgrade of, well, hold on, if I could just pull this up here, basically. Where is it? I believe it is a proper upgrade of Metal Slug 7. Yes, Metal Slug 7, basically. Now, Double X was only previously available on PlayStation Portable and Xbox Live Arcade. Eventually, the game was re-added to the backwards compatibility program 5 years later, November of 2015, and was later ported to PlayStation 4 and PC through Steam in 2018. Basically, it features additional content. You can do co-op multiplayer and downloadable content, and you also have other major upgrades as well. There are serious differences between them, basically, such as having Leona playable from the get-go in the Steam and PS4 version. You can also do 4K 1080p resolution. Characters in the menu screen have been redrawn. Borders for the clear and 4:3 aspect ratios. Scanline simulates CRT and arcade screens. PlayStation Trophy support, and Steam Achievement support. So, if you're looking to get more Metal Slug, well, you'll find it here, of course, but by and large, it's pretty much what you normally would expect from a Metal Slug game. There's really not much else I can say about it because it's basic your simple run and gun action like other Metal Slugs. And yeah, I liked it like I do the others. Back on the Sega grind, we beat a couple in one day. Streets of Kamarocho, which basically was like a crossover between Streets of Rage and Yakuza. You'd play as characters from Yakuza in a Streets of Rage style beat 'em up. Fun game, a bit short, and of course, but you wouldn't expect much from Sega's anniversary stuff. Enjoyable game, and yeah. Also, Armor of Heroes. I don't think this was a direct reference to anything else per se, but it was definitely a tank game of sorts that was pretty, I guess, somewhat interesting, but not quite here. I don't even get why they did this one fully compared to other ones as well. Oh wait, let me see. Apparently integrates some art and models from Relic Entertainment's beloved Company of Heroes, which in itself was never really a Sega-owned property, but only became Sega-owned because, well, the swine over at THQ went out of business because, well, of course they did. Of course they did. Again, decent multiplayer tank action, but not much to go into here. We only have a few 4 actual games left before we get to the big Wink and Cloud grind, so let's just get to this next one. Tetris Worlds. I already did a review of this game, so I'm not going to spend much time here. My only regret in that review was not making a Bob Ross joke in it, basically, because, you know, I mentioned that Tetris World is basically ASMR Tetris before ASMR was a thing. So, yeah, it's weird, crazy. It's got very unique variants of Tetris, each with something different to offer, even if they do kind of blend together. But the game itself, it does have fun, especially if you're a diehard Tetris fan. If not, you may pass on it entirely, but again, I got it with the Clone Wars bundle, so I got it cheap as well, so yeah, I'd say it was worth it. So yeah, and also, knock down those blocks, basically, because it's almost like clearing the way for a beautiful little image, and sometimes you just want to beat the devil out of them blocks. Yeah, there we go, Bob Ross, the reference here. I'm not making up for that mistake for it. Next game I beat was Stuntman on the PlayStation 2. Again, I already talked about this game in a separate review, solely because I was disappointed with it. Because this game is very frustrating. It is way more trial and error, and you're not really going to have a good time if that's not your style of gameplay, trust me. Honestly, this game still felt rough around the edges, really rough, and needed some other work around it, so I don't know if I can really fully recommend it. Unless you want a game that will challenge you, if you enjoy this trial by error crap, and you happen to be a fan of Reflections games, so yeah. I've yet to play the sequel, Stuntman Ignition. I know that was made by a different team, but I still want to play it and see how it compares to the original, so I'll be keeping my eye out for it this year. Just Cause 4 was the next one on the list, and oh boy, this game was intense. And by intense, I mean intensely insane, full of action. Yeah, at this point, you know what you're getting with Just Cause. You're freeing an army, basically. You're helping an army liberate an island or area of sorts. You've got your islandscapes that you just want to hang glide or parasail across to while listening to the Jurassic Park theme. But you also have some very other unique storm-like conditions, including going inside of a friggin' tornado itself. Yeah, the Just Cause series has always been filled with a lot of insane action set pieces, and this game is very much no different here itself. So if you like the past games, and who doesn't, you'll probably enjoy this more than likely. I'd say I did. The last real game, basically, before the endless Winged Cloud craziness I beat was Spec Ops: The Line, and man, if you want a very story-heavy game that actually will make you think about the horrors of war itself and what people go through in dealing with this stuff, like in action, this game might be for you. But be warned, it's a very intense title that you may not want to play through more than once. This is not a simple, generic war action game like COD. No, this one actually makes you think. It's very damn unique. I ended up getting it for like $1 with Sid Meier's Pirates and one other game, and I'm glad I did, because honestly, this game is more than worth that. It plays well, it does look well, and intense as hell, and really just, you need to play it for yourself, dear viewer. I cannot state how intense this game is, and I can't even describe some of the more intense, crazy shit in it. It may not leave you the same. It is something that will probably change you once you play it once. You come out a changed person. Again, list on Letterboxd. Games that will, or movies that once you watch them, they change. You become a changed person partially. You don't think the same. There needs to be a list of games like that, and I think Spec Ops would be one of them. So please play it at some point. Now we get to the friggin' Winged Cloud grind. These are the last two for the month of May, so I'll count them as one, back to back rather. Sakura Succubus and Sakura Succubus 2. Oh my god, what am I doing with my life to play these fucking things? The Succubus games, well, I'll just read you the description here. Sakura Succubus is a lewd visual novel about amassing a harem of sexy succubi. Featuring a cute idol, a domineering businesswoman, and a spacey social media star, there's no shortage of women to woo! Yeah, it's the same thing like every other Winged Cloud visual novel, multiple different endings. This time, not of the Yuri variety. We have a man getting into a harem with women and having sexy sex, and I think I've gone on enough, basically. Again, it is what it is. Should you really want to subject yourself to it, I'm not going to stop you, but I am going to warn you that unless you get sucked into this winged cloud madness. You might not want to. And then Succubus 2, which is a direct sequel to the first, picking up where the last story left off. Hiroki is courted by 2 new succubi who want to join his harem, an elegant actress and a cheerful tennis player. So, yeah. Again, see the first game here. I'm not going to repeat myself because we'll be wasting time. Okay, thanks, bye. And just when you thought the winged cloud bullshit wouldn't end, we kick off the summer with a whole bunch of it. And then some. Don't worry, there are still some actual games peppered in here. All 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All 8 of them. So let's just speedrun these winged cloud ones. Starting with Sakura Gamer. The antisocial Neko Hime is dragged into the world of video game development by her childhood best friend and arch nemesis, Clover and Suki. Will she make a successful game and maybe even fall in love? Yes, because Yuri and sexy sex and all, and a little bit of self-referential humor in this one, we get to separate it. Ooh, yeah, self-referential humor. Like Winged Cloud are referencing that this shit actually happened in real life, and that this game is somehow based off true events. Oh my god, this is just the most insane thing I could keep thinking of. It's kind of sad when you think about it, but what can you do, really? Whatever. Then you have Sakura Gamer 2. Once again, another sequel to their super popular debut title, and I put that in quotes, Miko made. A cute, sometimes sexy story about visual novel development sprinkled with meta humor. Oh no, they really hit you on the head with the meta humor. Again, see the previous game. And then Sakura Space. Captain Sheikah has seen all kinds of things in her adventures throughout the universe, and with her 2 loyal crew members by her side, she's managed to make a name for herself, for a small company of mercenaries. When Sheikah finds a bounty job offering an absurd amount of money, she doesn't hesitate to act. Again, see previous one, except without the meta humor, back in space, and what you see is what you get. I should just use those words for everything going forward, but I don't want to waste any more time, so let's just go to the next game. Finally, we get our first actual game of the month, Nights into Dreams. Had this one sitting in the backlog, never actually properly played through it. I went ahead and did. So Nights into Dreams has a bit of a learning curve to it, but once you do get the curve down and understand how it works, it is a pretty good game, actually. You get very rewarded for understanding it properly and playing through it, and you'll need to, otherwise you won't be able to advance. This game is so also damn whimsical, it's not even funny. I think it would just kick the ass of that whimsical joke Nostalgia Critic made in one of his reviews. Was it the Hey Crazy Nice review? I can't remember. Anyways, Nights into Dreams is has a bit of a curve, but once you understand it, it's a very fun game to play. I played the re-release on PC, and if you want to, do it that way, because yeah, I even ended up getting the sequel, Night's Journey of Dreams, on the Wii. Have yet to play through it, but maybe we'll play through it this year. I don't know, we'll see. Uh-oh, here comes a bevy of games of Winged Cloud crap, like one per each day almost. Sakura Night. Oh boy, I don't even have any of these friggin' worded. Will the page give me a description? Adventurous young Estelle dreams of being a knight just like her famous mother Cressida, but her journey is far more difficult than she ever anticipated. See previous Winged Cloud visual novel. Sakura Night 2. Ooh, Estelle's adventure continues in the sequel. Strives to become a knight like her mother still. Accompanied by the ditzy Felicia, mischievous Tart, and the affectionate Rune, Estelle faces a new foe, gets kicked out of the local hot springs, and kisses a lot of cute girls. See previous game. Sakura Sadist here. Just a little something kind of different for the inner sadist in all of us, but no. Music student Asusa concocts a plan to get on the good side of her crush, the impeccable and unreachable Mamiko. But is she prepared to face the consequences? Why don't you just look it up elsewhere and find out yourself? I can't be bothered to tell you. Then we get to Nova. Oh my god, there's more. Join Mikage, Kaguya, and Arisa as they train together, fight together, and come together at a prestigious academy for young, sexy, aspiring knights. Hey, phrasing. It's adventure of action, magic, and humor, with the same thing Winged Cloud has always fucking done. I will say this one actually does have voiceovers in it for a change. Granted, they're all in Japanese, for whatever damn reason, but hey, I guess it's better than nothing. Oh god, here's one for ya. Magical girls. Whoo! Date 3 magical girls who make a spectacular entry into a beach resort, protecting love itself from the forces of evil in the newest Sakura game from Winged Cloud. Nope. And now we get to the MMO games themselves. They're positioned a little differently, but yeah. But wait, there's still more. I'm not done with this crap. Oh boy. Delightfully evil me. MMO. Join Kotone in the visual novel on her adventure as Viola in her online game Asphalt Online. Find friends, accept their quests, and get to know the world of Asphalt with a little more love. Then MMO 2. Bola's quest in the land of Asphalt continues. Supported by her party of cute girls, she tries to learn who summoned her to Asphalt and why. Will she finally uncover the truth? And then the Succubus 3. The third part of Succubus series finds Hiroki enjoying himself with his Succubus harem, as you do with this shit. His days pass peacefully until he meets a mysterious woman who claims to have a strong connection to him. See the previous Succubus games. Then MMO 3, the final part of the series, which concludes Viola's adventure. Only a few months ago, she was an average woman bored with her life in Japan. Her only escape was Asphalt Online. Pouring thousands of hours into this game, knew it was more than a game and could never be a suitable substitute for reality, until she gets transported into the fucking world itself, recruiting a crude party of girls, fulfill her biggest dream, having a harem. Yeah, I'd rather just play through all the original Dot Hack games again instead of this crap. Then, Sakura Cupid. Lilium, a lazy Cupid exiled from heaven, accidentally makes a human girl fall in love with her while trying to steal a free cup of coffee. Sounds ridiculous, and we're going to talk about an actual game now. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. I had played Racer Revenge back in 2019, but I never played the original. Well, I decided to rectify that earlier in June of 2021, and I have to say, it's actually a really good racing game. It doesn't have much focus on combat as its sequel does, Revenge, but it's still a pretty good, enjoyable game that, well, makes you race pods. You feel like you're racing pods, you upgrade them, you run through all the cups, beat them all, and you win the game. It's that simple. It does look a little dated in some regards, but for the most part, Episode 1 Racer is actually a lot of fun still. And if you like Star Wars racing games, give that one a go. I think you'll really enjoy it. And, crap. Before we get to the rest of the actual games, we're going to speed run 3 more crampy Winged Cloud madness. Succubus 4. Hiroki and his harem on a relaxing vacation at the beach and a fun story full of cute girls. All these descriptions feel very samey, like you could apply them to all the other games. Night 3. Well, with except the actual visual differences, but you get the idea. Night 3. Estelle's adventures in the land of Lemora come to a head in this Yuri fantasy visual novel. Estelle faces a fierce challenge in the form of wicked dragonkin Saga, all while deciding which member of her party she wants to pledge her heart to. Hard to fight evil and fall in love. MMO Extra. Viola has this lighthearted Yuri fantasy story in Asphalt as she tackles her biggest challenge yet, working a maid cafe. Oh, Winged Cloud loves their maid cafe fetish. We'll get to that one later, people. Okay, let's talk about an actual game. Let's finish this month with real games, starting with Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus is the sequel to Wolfenstein: The New Order. Now, I have to say, I think New Colossus is actually a much better game than the first. It has a way more intense story. The gameplay is even more tightened, basically. And it feels way smoother. It looks way better. It runs like a beast on my machine despite some other slight hiccups here and there. And honestly, I think this is actually a much better game despite some more frustrating sections. I think it's a much better game. better than the game that came before it in the New Order. Don't get me wrong, I love Wolfenstein New Order, but I think I love Wolfenstein 2 The New Colossus even more. It has a way more intense story, and if you like the previous game, or any Wolfenstein for that matter, play it. And if you haven't played the series, well, what are you doing? Go and play the series, because it's awesome. Okay, next up is Battletoads. This is the re-released Battletoads, or the remake, new-ish kind of game that came out in 2020. And let's just say when I got this on sale, it was already $5, not even long after. I probably had it sitting there for months, so yeah, let me actually look. Battletoads. In fact, it's on sale right now for $5. Yeah, I don't even know. It's not even telling me when I bought it, but whatever. So, Battletoads is, well, it was technically developed by Dallas Studios under the supervision of Rare, and I want to talk about this one separately as well, because it's kind of, yeah, even at $5, I feel like it's a bit much. The thing with Battletoads is that it's not a particularly long game, and when it sticks to the Battletoads stuff that you know what it does, it's really good. But when the game starts to, towards the second half, it kind of starts to veer off away from that, and yeah, it does not end up well for it. I do want to talk about this at one point or another, because this is a bizarre game, and the crazy thing is that, I don't know, could have been a bit better for my take. Tales from the Borderlands. I started it last year, didn't finish it. I ended up finishing it this year, and goddamn, this is actually one of the better Telltale games you will play. Borderlands is already rooted in a good amount of lore and a unique story behind it as well. So a game like this actually would have been right up Telltale's alley. And lo and behold, it's actually pretty good. It's got a pretty gripping story. Choices do matter a bit more than the others. And yeah, the only downside now is that if you try to play it on Steam, it's capped to 60 FPS. I have no idea why it is. Telltale games would typically run with their engines unlocked, but running it at 1080p, the game would not go above 60. I don't know what happened. I think some update may have happened because the game was temporarily pulled when Telltale went under. Fortunately, 2K got the rights back, put it back up on Steam, but I don't know what they did with some shit. They messed with other shit they shouldn't have, but that's beside the point. Please at least play it at some point regardless. Sniper Ghost Warrior 3. I don't know if I like this one as much as the other two. Again, that's not saying much because they're basic, simple games from City Interactive. But for the most part, it does try to do a little bit more of an open world approach with the game while still doing the first-person perspective compared to the third-person of Sniper Elite. And it is more open-ended too, but I don't know. It also kind of ran a bit worse on my system as well. And I don't think it really holds up as good as the other two. I do, or at least the second. That's my personal favorite of the bunch. I will say that I do think the setting for it is unique and all, but it really also feels more action-ish, way less sniper-ish at times, but what can you do? Okay, so in the midst of everything, I actually forgot to record a piece for this particular game, and I didn't want that to happen again, because I forgot to log Sonic Generations, or was it Team Sonic Racing? One of the two ones that I didn't beat proper, one of those last year. I think it may have actually been Generations, but there's really not much I can probably actually do about that, but I actually forgot to talk about this one here. Ultimately, yeah, that is the Blob here. The Blob is a pretty interesting game on the whole, actually. It was, well, it basically is kind of like this painting, platforming kind of game itself, where you're this blob, and you can basically absorb color and go around painting gray objects, basically. Just bringing more color to them, shall we say. Originally, it came out on the Nintendo Wii, but later it got ported to other platforms, courtesy of THQ Nordic. You can get it on PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. It is pretty much an interesting game, rolling around, coloring things in specific ways as well, doing other interesting challenges, finding all the collectibles. This is a pretty unique platformer with a very unique theme. And yeah, I'm glad I did play it. Might not be one to play on Twitch because sometimes you want to indulge in a platformer like this. And another game that we're going to talk about later on when we get to December. Actually, the last game I beat for 2021. But trust me, it is a pretty enjoyable game. So yeah, play the Blob as well and its sequel. Now let's actually finish this proper. Now, the last game of the month I beat, and more Wolfenstein knocking off the list, I had picked this up in the Steam Summer Sale because it was one of the cheaper things I could get, was Wolfenstein Youngblood. Youngblood itself actually is more like a side set piece set between the events of the new Colossus and whatever the hell the next game is going to be. Youngblood was actually co-developed by Machine Games and Arcane Studios, the people who made Dishonored. This game actually had a very mixed reception when it came out, as although people praised the combat and other elements, they felt it was like a step down from the previous installment. This Youngblood takes place 20 years after the new Colossus, and the thing is, BJ Blazkowicz, the main protagonist of the series, disappears without a trace. So basically, his two twin daughters, Jess and Sophia, are on the look to basically find him, find their father, and see what happened, as well as continue to find other areas of the world still occupied by the Nazis. The thing with the co-op elements here is that the way you could feel Arcane's influence is through a lot of the stealth elements, too, because there definitely feels like more stealth here than there is action. Although there's still a decent amount in the previous game, it feels more noteworthy here considering Dishonored was a stealth game. On top of that, you also have more co-op perspective, but you can entirely play the game in single player, which I think is pretty cool, at least on the whole. So if you're not big into the co-op side, or you don't have anyone who has a PC, I promise one day we'll fix it. So my girlfriend, okay, maybe not, because she ideally disowned this game, but we'll play something else together at some point. But yeah, ultimately, despite some dissuading from her, I still wanted to give this a shot because it was pretty cheap, and I didn't actually hate it all that much. I kind of enjoyed it. Now, it's not really as good as the new Colossus, like, not even close, but for what it is, I do think it is a pretty enjoyable game. It still uses the same good engine and stuff that powered the previous game, that being id Tech 6, so it still runs like a beast on this system at times. And I do think a lot of the settings for it are pretty unique, basically. The upgrade system's kind of interesting, and it definitely does much more different stuff than your other Wolfenstein game, although it does feel like leaning more on that side. If you're not really a bigger fan of Arcane stuff, you might not enjoy this as much, especially because you will feel their influence in a weird way of sorts. So, yeah, either way, it is a decent game, I'd say, but buyer with caution. Yeah. And continuing into the month of July, we've got The Blob 2, picking up where we last left off with the first game. The Blob 2 does make some serious improvements into the first game. It makes it feel less floaty, actually, a bit more tighter with some of the controls as well. And that probably also had to do with the fact that, well, when The Blob 2 came out, instead of being a Wii exclusive like the first, it also came out on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 as well. But it also got ported to later platforms as well here. Anyways, this game basically does pick up where the first version left off still. Once again, the main villain from the first is back and tries to cause more havoc and darken up the city with ink and all. And once again, we're back as the Blob, basically, to do what we do best. Color things up and just, well, give things more life. Beat the black and white out of it. Beat the devil out of it, if you will. Yeah, anyways. It's pretty similar to the first, it does feel like there are more gameplay additions, like you now have a dash attack to break through obstacles and take out most foes at the expense of number of paint points. Also, you can earn inspiration points used at the Idea Emporium to purchase upgrades such as increased paint capacity and defensive shields. There's more power-ups within levels as well, like Magnetic Wrecking Ball to roll up metal surfaces, sink underwater, and destroy any enemy easily. Hazmat Suits to protect you from passive hazards like ink and hot plates. Gravitation Bomb to transform Blob into a devastating black hole. Regen also constantly replenishes your pain points, and the Rainbow gives you infinite pain points and use of all 7 colors at once. The game also has some 2-player co-op, basically similar to Super Mario Galaxy, actually, where you take control of a member of the Color Underground who assists Blob and helps him surmount more difficult challenges. Bosses also play a way larger role in this game, having to use paint mechanics in more thoughtful ways in order to defeat them. And did I mention basically that the game at one point goes all Mario Galaxy on you? It's not a coincidence that I mention it there. Although there's really no checkpoint between that and just the whole final level with the final boss. So if you fuck up there, you gotta do the whole thing a bit. Believe me, I almost got the best of it. It almost got the best of me and made me want to quit playing the day. For that last day I was doing it on Twitch. But ultimately I persevered and I actually beat it, which I'm glad that I did. I'd say better than the first in some regards, but also one step back. Not a major few steps back, but just one. Still, both are pretty enjoyable, but maybe don't stream them unless you want to sink serious time into the platformer. Next up is Sniper Elite 4. I had this one for a while when I started installing games to my SSD, bigger games to take up to play there so I could install them there because my main hard drive cannot handle bigger games at the moment. Yeah, I decided Sniper Elite 4 would be one of them as I bought it on a sale but never had a proper chance to play it. And I gotta say, after actually taking out the approach properly instead of trying to rush head on into things with patience and all, I have to say, not only did I have a much more pleasant time with Sniper Elite 4 compared to the other games, but it's actually my personal favorite in the entire franchise. Story is the best, probably improves the best gameplay of everything and all, and ultimately I had the best time with it, because 1, I don't think Sniper Elite 1 has aged that well. Sniper Elite 2 and was not really the best of time, and 3 ended up being a rushed cheat job, basically, hack job, whatever, just modding it to have you know what. But here, I took my time with it, played it like intended, and even though there were some annoying bits, once you overcome those harder bits, it's a very rewarding feeling and helps keep your momentum going into later sections. So, yeah, just take patience with Sniper Elite and you'll be fine. Maybe I'll play Remastered V2 at some point. I'm kind of thinking about it. Hopefully it may improve my opinion about that game. While I still like it, I just kind of was, yeah. Oh, crap. It looks like one little Winged Cloud snuck its way in there. Don't worry, this is the last of the Winged Cloud stuff. I promise you, basically. At least for this month, this is the only one. The rest is actual legitimate games. But Sakura Forest Girls was another one that was in that Winged Cloud madness. Yaya, a plucky young huntress, and Ayana, a shy girl born into a family of shamans, go on a journey to find their missing childhood friend Coco. Along the way, they meet a mischievous witch Maya, and sparks fly. See every other Winged Cloud visual novel that I've talked about up to this point. What I will say is that I started to confuse this one with Night because this is how similar they start to get, where you start mixing them up together, basically, because it's like, what the hell? Yeah, everything just starts to become a blur together and you forget what's what. They're not really too memorable. Now, this is technically a replay, but I did beat this game on the 360, probably in its original form, and not the DX form of it on PC, but Sonic Adventure DX. Sonic Adventure DX, I would have to say, is a pretty... Sonic Adventure DX was an upgrade of the first game itself, and brings more content here, so, yeah. I think people still give quite a bit of crap to 3D Sonic, but honestly, this game was still pretty good for the time. And while I still do think it holds up quite a bit, it probably slacks a little towards the easier side of things once you've played through it at least once or so, and I did feel that here. That said, I still really like Sonic Adventure a heck of a whole lot, honestly, given what it did for 3D action game as well, for 3D games, and honestly, it actually gave Sega a decent baseline to use for the 3D stuff going forward. However, things kind of did go off the end a little bit, but all in good time. Still, I really still think fondly of Sonic Adventure EX, and I suggest you give it a play yourself if you haven't at some point. Next game is Hitman, the 2016 one set within the trilogy known as the World of Assassination Trilogy. Again, SSDs all lead me to this game. Genuinely going into this, I was a little bit worried. I'm not gonna lie, actually. I was worried because of the episodic nature of the game, which I didn't think was a good idea, as at that time I thought Telltale shit was starting to become a bit more linear, basic, too much of the same stuff, and I was afraid that this would lean into that same world. And honestly, with how the team envisioned it at IO Interactive, envisioned the game as a service, it's seriously worrying me, and that's why I put off playing it for a while, at least until after it came out. And even when I bought it, I did not play through it for a good while until like July 2021. I have to say, this is actually a really, really good game. It does fix many of the issues people had with Absolution, and genuinely, I do think it still does bring some interesting things to the table while still keeping the freedom of how you want to take out your targets that the Hitman games are very well known for here. Only it's just expanded things to be opened up a bit more. I'm still not happy with the nature of how they treated this game, but I can assure myself, or you all, that this game is actually really enjoyable, basically. And even if you have some doubts about it, give it a chance. If you liked the previous Hitman games, I think you will enjoy this despite some of the other stuff. And just be warned about that always on crap, but you get the idea here. So yeah. Next up is Saints Row the Third Remaster. It's hard to believe that when I got a hold of it, that Saints Row the Third was a 10-year-old game when the remaster finally came to Steam, because it came out in 2020, but it was an Epic Game Store PC bullshit exclusive. So I didn't end up getting it until a year later on Steam. And keep in mind, because I already owned the previous game, I got a discount for it, actually. Yes, I did. So I ended up getting it. I thought, okay, I'll replay it here separately in my own time and see how I enjoy it, because I put way too much time into the original game for a proper basis of how long it would have taken to beat. So I ended up replaying the third remastered, and well, I'd still say the game kind of sort of holds up in some regards. Not so much for what it did for the Saints Row franchise afterwards, but as a game itself, there's still a lot to enjoy about the open worldness of it, even if it is a couple sets back. The remastering, though, kind of doesn't look ideally particularly exciting, but there are some areas of improvement. The gameplay itself has pretty much been unchanged, and yeah. I will say, though, there still is some fun to be had with the third, like when you're skydiving onto the friggin' Penthouse and Power by Kanye West is playing. That's an awesome moment. There's also some other crazier set pieces as well, basically taking out bigger objects, and just generally I think the mayhem thing was cranked up to it. Honestly, I feel it's more fun to just screw around in Saints Row the Third than it is to play through the main game proper, especially once you've beat it. So yeah, if you're a fan, of course, you've probably already played it to death. If you're looking to get into it, this might be the best way to do it if you've got a more powerful, beefy PC. And now that I had finished the third remastered, I realized I had never properly beaten the original Saints Row on the 360. So I went ahead and did that, and well, I don't want to talk about this too much. All I'm going to say is that this game really has not aged well. It needs some kind of updated re-release. I know it's on the backwards compatibility for Xbox One, but that's not enough. I feel like we need some other re-release, but Volition would rather forget about this. And especially with the fact that that new awful reboot is coming out that looked like crap, that they actually delayed the game to like later this year, 2022. You can forget about them ever going back to this one. They've completely left us in the past. Us old fans, they don't give a shit about us anymore. No, they'd rather fucking cater to someone who never gave a crap about the games in the first place. Because they, for all that fucking money that doesn't exist, that they don't want to spend. That's all they care about. Sorry, guys. It just... As much as flawed as this game is, it does remind me of a better time in the franchise history. So, yeah... Maybe play it, but just try, if you want to get into the franchise, because it still is a key part of the story, but just play it on an Xbox One, or even an Xbox Series X/S, if you have one. Okay, next up, this game, in particular here, turned 20 years old. It is old when I played it. It is Sonic Adventure 2. I played the PC version on Steam as it was another one, and I thought I owed this game a replay after properly beating Adventure 2 Battle in 2019. And well, I don't think my opinions have changed very much on this game. While I have warmed up to the mech sections, I'm still not a fan of the treasure sections, and there was some genuine struggles to try and get through all that crap. Like, I don't want to get too much into it. I probably already went over it more in the 2019 video. But genuinely, they made the treasure sections way more where the hell do I go, and it's just more of a pain in the ass than it should be, and does grind the game at times to a halt when you're just trying to get through these crazy, big, maze-like levels. It's just... bleh. Otherwise, everything else about the game is fine. It has an awesome presentation, looks, sounds, plays fine when it actually does not have those frustrating treasure hunting stages, and yeah. You'll probably want to play it at some point, but you might not revisit it very often for good reason. Just everything else like the music. Okay, next game is Reckless the Yakuza Missions. Picked this one up at Anime Matsuri for 2021 for about $5. They had it higher price, but their system had it listed at $5, so I got it for $5. This is a driving game that came out on the Xbox, and... well, it came out on other platforms as well, but the Xbox version was the one to have when this game came out, because, well, for starters, it looked like an amazing game back in the day. It is a driving game where you take two sides of cops and bad guys. There is one separate campaign where you play as a cop, basically, cops, and then you have the other side playing as the bad guys. It is basically set in Hong Kong, basically. You're either playing a part of a unit attempting to crack down on rival Yakuza operations, or spies hired to take down Tiger Takagi, the head of the Hong Kong Yakuza. This game itself looked amazing and also had some fun driving stuff, but the GameCube and PS2 versions do actually look worse. Sadly, I had to play the GameCube version on Twitch because... well, it's not compatible on the Xbox 360 to my saddening knowledge, but what can I do, really? And I didn't have a proper setup, so yeah. So anyways, this game, if you want a decent, quick driving game that you can finish in a dedicated afternoon, is probably worth it. There's actually a sequel, but that only came out in Japan. It was called Double Steel: The Second Clash. In Japan, Reckless was known as Double Steel, so yeah. Give it a shot, basically, if you want more like it. Sylphie the Lost Planet. This is a shooter that was made by... I believe this was actually made by Treasure. I picked this one up at Retropalooza Houston in 2021. I think I got it for about 20-ish bucks or so. Under 25, I know. And yeah. Oh yeah, so The Lost Planet here was a sequel... excuse me, to the original Sylphie that came out on the Sega CD. It was co-developed by Treasure and Game Arts. It is pretty much a standard vertical scrolling shooter and takes place 31 years after the events of the first game. More human colonies in the solar system have been destroyed by U2, well, UTOO. They're an alien civilization. And to prevent them from destroying remaining colonies, as well as other celestial bodies within the universe, a squadron of starfighters known as Sylphies are deployed to destroy them and restore peace to the universe. There's 8 different stages, and it's a fun game, but if you're not good at shmups, you might want to have an action replay on hand. It's got an interesting look, too. It was actually another early title on the system, and yeah, God bless Sylphie. And it's another one to add to the treasure list of games, because they have very unique games, even if, yeah, this one treads that stuff there. Haven Call of the King is up next, and this was a pretty interesting platformer. This was made by Traveler's Tales and published by Midway. It was going to come out on other platforms, but only ended up remaining a PlayStation 2 exclusive. On top of that, the game itself was going to be the first part of a trilogy of games. However, due to this one underselling back in the day, we never got any follow-ups whatsoever, so it's just this first game and what could have been. This is a pretty interesting platformer. It does feel in a way like a weird, more expanded version of Crash Wrath of Cortex, which was also made by Traveler's Tales. And what I will say is that this game is very ambitious for its own good. I would like to talk about this one as well. I know you probably hear me say it a lot, but trust me, I think a lot of these games are interesting and would make for good reviews. But Haven itself was a very ambitious title. It's not just a specific, like, solely dedicated platformer game. You have other bits that break up the monotony, like racing sequences in boats, flying sequences in spaceships where you can just jump to light speed for various different planets, and if that's too slow, ludicrous speed. But yeah, this was a very ambitious title back in the day, and playing it now, you can really see what they were trying to go for. I feel with a little bit more time behind it, this game could have really been special and been the next big, like, franchise of sorts, platformer, but sadly, it never got that, and the game actually does end on a cliffhanger ending. I'm just warning y'all now before you decide to play it. Luckily, Haven's a pretty cheap game. I got it from one of my local game stores around the time of my birthday, basically, and I ended up getting it for like $5. Some copies might be going for a little higher than that, like 5 to 10. Around that price, it's probably fine. It is a bit of a long one, but you do get some interesting content for it, so give it a shot if you're interested in unique platformers. Inuyasha Feudal Combat up next. I already did a full-bore review of this one, and I think I outlined my thoughts pretty well in this game. All I'll say is that it's surprisingly still holding its value at around $30 or so for a complete in-box copy as of reading this here, so it might go down a little bit more. I still feel like I paid a bit much, but sadly, this is what happens. PlayStation 2 collecting's kind of getting fucked, especially if you love these middle-of-the-road games, people. Like I said, decent action game if you're a fan of Inuyasha, especially, but maybe try to get it cheaper if you can help it. Yeah. Here's a game I hadn't played in years, but finally got off my ass and went and beat Battlefield Bad Company 2. This was the only, like, Battlefield you could get on Steam for a while, and in my opinion, I think this is actually a really solid entry in the franchise. I actually haven't played much Battlefield. I think this is the only Battlefield game that I've actually went out of my way to beat, because I had it for years, never beat it. Finally did, and I would recommend it, Battlefield Bad Company 2. It basically is a more modern war type of game compared to what you normally had expected for the franchise up to this point. However, I think its campaign actually is even better than some of the other more COD Modern Warfare games, too. Characters have actually more personality, and there's even more other crazier stuff, and yeah, Bad Company 2, I loved it. Next up, I actually bought this game from one of my other guys when I went to Retropalooza Houston 2021. He's the same guy who gave me Ultimate Ninja 2 for a great price and Nocturne for $14 when I only had 100 left or something like that, or lower on other cash. I don't know, it was crazy. So yeah, I forget his name, unfortunately. He knows who he is. Major shout out to him. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have gotten Ultimate Ninja 3 for 10 bucks. And I'm glad I did, because this is actually my favorite Ultimate Ninja game out of all of them that I've played. I could not find Ultimate Ninja 4 there. I'm trying to see if I can get a hold of it before it maybe goes up in price a bit here. And yeah, I have to say, Ultimate Ninja 3 is my personal favorite because, well, the story mode they've reduced to but not be so complicated and ridiculously hard like the past ones at times. And the new mode that they added, the RPG mode, is actually a really nice solid addition to it. It's not particularly long, but it is enjoyable in its own way. And if you like action stuff like that, fighting ones, and you want more of the best Ultimate Ninja game, if you had to get just one, I'd probably get Ultimate Ninja 3. Finally, the last game that I played for the month of July was the Simpsons game. This was another Retropalooza Houston pickup, but unfortunately, it was a little bit of a tougher game to find, as I don't know what it is with this one, but it's seemingly commanding a series, starting to get up there in terms of money if you want to get the 360 version, or even the PlayStation 3 version, which is rocking in that $40 range. The 360 version's at the $35 range, which is, I believe, is how much I got it for. It's still holding its value surprisingly well. Unfortunately, though, it's kind of bad, but it's still a good... The pricing is bad. The game is fine. It basically does feel like a more full-bore episode. Like, the cutscenes are actually animated to have actual, like, show-quality animation, basically. The gameplay has a decent amount of variety with action and platforming and all the good stuff as well that you would expect from a game like this. And genuinely, I think this is another funny game as well. I would also probably put this in my funniest games I ever played. So, yeah, if you still haven't played the Simpsons game, try to get it if you can. It's kind of getting up there depending on which version you get. But if you have a 360, just get that version as it's cheaper. And I really like it. I like it. I don't know if I call it my favorite Simpsons game of all time, but probably in the top 3 at this point. At top 5 at latest. Finally, as the summer starts to cool down, we get into August. Well, maybe not temperature-wise, but game-wise. Still played a good amount, though, so let's start with Lethal Skies, Elite Pilot Team SW. Lethal Skies is another flight combat game that is gasp, much like Ace Combat. The main differences between it and the other Ace Combat games is that these missions are more quicker paced, not as long, and they have less leeway for error, but you really have to be more precise, basically, or you're in trouble. Again, I would like to talk about this one further, but that's basically the gist of everything. Got it for a good price, and if you like pilot games, flight games, give it a go. Next up, we have Hitman 2 on PC. This is a sequel to the 2016 Hitman game, and while following some of the same stuff like the first game, like the episodic stuff of the World of Assassination trilogy, on the whole, this is a pretty solid game that improves a lot of the first one's shortcomings and kind of makes things fully come into their own. But there are some drawbacks, like the cutscenes aren't actually moving like enough anymore and other things like that, but for the most part, the game is still enjoyable, keeps what made the previous one good, and yeah, if you like the 2016 game, you will like Hitman 2. Sadly, I don't have the third game because of this World of Assassination trilogy, because that's currently only available on Epic Games Store, but it probably won't be for much longer given the 1 year crap's about to be over with it, so yeah. Next up, I have Way of the Samurai, which I got from one of my main men from Retropalooza Houston, the almighty Hov Geese, for a good price, so shout out once again to Hov for hooking me up with it, and the game's sequel, which we'll talk about in a moment, getting everything for a good price with another game that I hope to play this year, but we'll see. Anyways, Way of the Samurai, I do want to review both of these games separately, but here's what I'll say about it. If you go into Way of the Samurai expecting something like Onimusha, I think you're going to be let down because it's really not like Onimusha. But for what it does offer, Way of the Samurai offers a pretty different action experience with more quick swordplay as well that requires you to be more strategic instead of mindlessly hacking and slashing away, and has a decent amount of replay value in it as well. So yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, give Way of the Samurai a go. Then you got Way of the Samurai 2. Way of the Samurai 2 is much of the same as the first, although it does run only at 30 FPS compared to the first game's 60 FPS. But it does have more replayability with more options for endings and a longer period of play as well. So ultimately, I do think the second game is a bit better than the first, but again, I want to talk about them separately. So yeah, there we go with that. And speaking of games I want to talk about separately, Alias. Remember when I mentioned earlier in the January section how I was binging Alias on Twitch, so I didn't play much there? Well, guess what? I eventually wanted to play the game, basically, because, well, I really got hooked on the show, and so I wanted to play the game as it kind of has a key piece of information, or not quite key, but it does take place between two specific episodes of, like, Season 2, towards the end of it. Unfortunately, the game was a bit of a letdown. I don't know if playing the PC port, which already wasn't that good enough, already a problem, or if the console versions would have been any better if the game wasn't. But I do want to review this one at some point as well. But needless to say, I was let down with Alias. Like, it kind of played a little clunky and just a bit rough around the edges compared to other action games of its day. Alright, the next game I beat was Far Cry 2. This is another one I hadn't played in years, and so I went back to it to beat it, and I'm kind of mixed about this game. Like, I could really appreciate the setting of it, as you don't see the setting of Africa in a lot of games very often, and I do think that's well executed here. The game still looks graphically good, even now, although maybe a little less on the totem pole compared to its sequels. But it still does look pretty good, and the setting is awesome. I do think it's kind of a unique change of pace from the first one, but not everything about it is executed well. The partner system often ends up failing, as all your partners will just end up dying more often than not, and the game can get way too intense at times for its own good. Plus, part of the realism was like, because the first one felt like sort of a B-80s action, an 80s action movie, B variety, if you will. But this one tries to take a more realistic approach here, and not all of it works, but it is a nice change of pace, and I definitely think there are things to enjoy about it. Now we have Too Human on the Xbox 360. This game was in the works for many years, and I mean many years. It went through many different platforms, from PlayStation to the GameCube, eventually to the Xbox 360, and well, it's kind of a letdown, basically. Before, back in the day, this was kind of the DNF, only of its day. While this game isn't a complete train wreck like Duke Nukem Forever, it is a disappointment that leaves a bit more to be desired. The combat can get very tedious very early on, and you cannot skip the dying animation, unless certain circumstances block the angel from coming down and picking you up. Things tend to progress on a bit too slow, battles can get repetitive, but at the same time I do think the game has a very unique setting. It's basically a cyberpunk setting mixed with Norse mythology. If that does sound interesting, maybe try to get it for cheap, or if you don't want a physical copy, you can currently, I believe, download it for free, actually. And I believe it may even be backwards compatible with Xbox One. You might want to get a friend to co-op it with you, though, as it will probably have a better experience. The next game I played was an indie puzzle game called Freebie. Now, this is a puzzle game of sorts that will not take you very long once you know what you're actually doing with it. How it works is that there's this square. When a side is green, you can knock a ball into it. When it's red, you can't. You only have a few lives, and if you knock it into the red too many times, it's game over. Your goal is to keep launching the ball which gets launched from a particular point onto the spinning blue piece. It bounces off of it and lands in any one of the four corners or any one of the four parts of a square. It's an interesting puzzle game, and once you get the pattern down, it won't take you too long, and you'll 100% it like that. Decent. Next game is Orphan, Scion of Sorcery. This is an action game with some RPG-ish like combat, but it isn't really a full RPG because there's not any leveling up systems. You gain new attacks, but for the most part, you will not like level up your characters to get stronger. The attacks themselves, it all comes down to timing and basic attacking. It is a decent action game. It looks fine, but unfortunately you can't skip the in-game cutscenes, and some of the later battles can get annoyingly long, and you have to reload the game every time you die, like Symphony of the Night, so yeah, that's kind of annoying. Not perfect, but can be enjoyable. And the last game we beat for August was Double Switch. Now, I had the PC port of Double Switch when it came out, still technically do in my Steam list, but I never got past Act 1. It wasn't until a few years later, or 2.5 years later, I decided to go back and fully attempt to beat the game. And I did, although it was very frustrating at first, like most trap-em-ups, but once you understand what you're doing, it actually becomes a fun experience. It is a bit more hectic than something like, say, Night Trap, where it's basically the same thing every time, but this game, there's a little bit more unpredictability, even if the story flows out the same, but please don't let that discourage you, because it still has its own very interesting plot, still B-movie camp-like nature. Corey Haim starred in it, and so did Arlie Ermy as well, and a bunch of other people. Some people would prefer this to Night Trap, and they're not entirely wrong. I'm not sure how to feel. I need to think about it some more, but yeah, I'm glad I revisited and actually finished and 100%ed Double Switch on Steam. Things did slow down quite a bit in September because school getting back into the fray of things and other things as well, but for the most part, it still progressed on pretty well. At least I got 5 games done that I really wanted to. The first was the Telltale Game of Thrones game. Much like Borderlands, Game of Thrones has a very unique lore and would be well suited to this type of game, Telltale point-and-click game. Unlike Tales from the Borderlands, I don't think this one went down as well as that one. It's not terrible per se, but you kind of do really need to be a bit more invested into the show, as it does bring in some real events and takes time a little before and after Joffrey's death just to give it some timeline. At least that's where they slotted in, and has actual other characters from this show as well brought in as well, in addition to the fictional bevy ones created specifically for this game. Unfortunately, I don't think it's quite as well executed. There is some enjoyment, but I don't know if they're using this as an introduction to Game of Thrones may be the best of ideas. Naruto Clash of Ninja is next. Now, after buying Clash of Ninja 2 at Retropalooza Houston 2021, I could not find the first one there, though, so I ended up buying a copy off eBay just so I could have them both and get the bonus in Clash of Ninja 2. If you have a save file on your memory card for CON 1, when you play CON 2, you get 10,000 to spend in the shop, and you will need that, but I'll get to that in a moment. Clash of Ninja 1, I'll just sum this up quick because I want to review it separately. Clash of Ninja 1 sets a proper baseline for the future Clash of Ninja games itself. And in general, the series itself pretty much was like a spiritual successor to the Bloody Roar franchise, basically, because it was made by aiding the people who made Bloody Roar. So if you like Bloody Roar and you're also a fan of Naruto, just give it a go, give it a play, and I think you'll enjoy it. Clash of Ninja 2, while I think is a better game from a gameplay standpoint, it still does have problems of its own. The main thing is just that it's a bit grindy at times. You have to grind more to unlock specific things in the shop, and the way that it's set up it's not entirely ideal. Again, if I ever decide to review Clash of Ninja 2, which I want to, I'll fully talk about it, but trust me, I do think both games are good. but I don't know if I'd quite put them on a higher pedestal compared to later games, but whatever. The next game I beat in September to warm myself up for a horror month was Resident Evil Code Veronica X. I bought this one at Retropalooza Houston after haggling a 2-disc copy when the main game disc was not in the best of shape, but I got it for cheaper than what they were offering, and I resurfaced it to get it working and did a full playthrough. Code Veronica X I ended up getting because, sadly, with Capcom, and even despite their tendency to remake the older games, which they've done for the first 3, I don't know why, but there's rumors persisting of them wanting to remake Resident Evil 4, and it's so damn annoying because Code Veronica is basically the real Resident Evil 3 to many, or a technical 4 if you count 3, because 3 is more like a brief expansion, really, and doesn't quite follow Claire Redfield, unlike this game. Now, I think Code Veronica has a good story on the whole, basically, and I do think it's a solid entry into the franchise as well, but it follows from the sadly dated tank controls like that past Resident Evils have, and with this one potentially maybe not getting a remake for a long time, I figured why not play it now at least and get it out of my system. So yeah, there you go. Code Veronica X. I still really like the game. I just wish that it would get a remake next instead of Resident Evil 4. And finally, the last game I beat actually was a Naruto game for the month of September. Uzumaki Chronicles. I picked up Uzumaki Chronicles also from Anime Matsuri for like $6 complete. Had to resurface it a few times to get it to work proper, but yeah, we'll talk about it when we get to it. And this game I ended up getting at Retropalooza Houston here. I haggled a little to get it for $12 from down to $15, and actually that may have been for the better because, well, there are some good things I like about Uzumaki Chronicles, but genuinely, I think there's more problems with it that make it less of an enjoyable experience compared to its sequel. I do want to talk about it separately, but there are major things with this game, like a lot of content was cut because of where we were in the anime in North America at the time we got this game, compared to them in Japan. On top of that, the actual gameplay suffers from a grind fest later on, and there's other levels that are basically a big pain in the ass to deal with. Some go on for way too long, and everything becomes too monotonous. It's a shame, really, but what can you do? October always brings horror games, and thus there was plenty of that, as what I do on Twitch is always horror month. Always come by there especially, and we got plenty load of all that stuff. So let's start with Dead Space 2. Dead Space 2 picks up where the first one left off. I played through it first. It was my last game I beat for October of 2020, so I thought, why not pick up the year after, right where we left off with Dead Space 2. Dead Space 2 is an improvement on the first game, basically, as it fixes a lot of the problems that were had, keeps what made the first game so brilliant, double down on it, add some new exciting sections, other functions, and genuinely I think is an excellent survival horror game, and I'm glad I beat it especially because I do prefer it over Dead Space 1, so yeah, play them both though if you haven't. Then, I decided to play the remastered Ghostbusters, the video game, which was bought specifically to be streamed, and yeah, the game was still pretty good on the whole. It makes you feel like you're an actual Ghostbuster. Well, I'll talk more about it here since I didn't when I beat the original back in March, but it makes you feel like an actual Ghostbuster. You play as a rookie who's basically brought in as well to help out the main gang as well, and they're all voiced like by their original actors, so like, you've got Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Harold Ramis before he passed away as the original game came out in 2009, and Ernie Hudson, along with a handful of other people as well that you've seen in the movies here. They reprise their roles for the game, but not everyone though. In spite of it, it still sounds amazing, and you feel like you're an actual Ghostbuster doing fun shit. trapping ghosts, going around, picking them up, scanning everything, buying all the upgrades, becoming the best Ghostbuster possible. Yeah, the game is fun. It's still good, even if there were a couple sections I struggled with. And speaking of struggling with, Blood Rain, the Terminal Cut. I'd already played Blood Rain 1 and 2 many years ago, the original versions, but with the re-release of these Terminal Cuts, which were given free to people who already owned the prior 2 games on Steam, yeah, I decided why not use it as an excuse to replay, because they're kind of part horror theme. You play as a vampire named Rain, and you're doing part vampire things as well. And the thing with the first Blood Rain is that it's really kind of a bit rough around the edges, a little more loose per se. You can go crazier with more platforming, but it's kind of not ideal. Combat is a little bit loose at times, and it does tend to feel a bit longer than it should, but you can enjoy it here and there in some parts. Now, going on to the sequel, Blood Rain 2, the Terminal Cut here, I do think it's a better game than the first, but it also still has its own problems as well. Like, it's a bit more difficult, and I seem to have lost some patience for trying to actually get it done, because at one point during the stream, I just threw the cheats on. Like, compared to the first game, which relatively isn't that difficult, except maybe in some later areas, Blood Rain 2 almost feels like a more serious challenge compared to the first. It focuses way more on specific platforming elements and knowing what to do for specific bosses. I had someone in my stream actually comment to help me out, because with the Terminal Cut, they changed the color of where you use your chain ability to yank something out of the final boss, basically, that creates a weakness. And the problem is it's not obvious, basically, because of the color change, and you might miss it the first time. Not to mention, you don't tend to use the chain whip as often as the game makes you think you should, and so when you need to use it, you forget entirely until like, oh shit, I need to use this thing that the game is basically giving me fuck all to do with. Yeah, kind of a pain. I still enjoy the Blood Rain games, but maybe not as much as before. I always put the second game on a higher pedestal, and I still would, but maybe not as much as before. Oh well, that's all for horror games. November brings the start of another series. Another series I did on Twitch, and a couple other ones I beat in my spare time. Here's the first game in that series I played on Twitch, the original Call of Juarez. I had them sitting in my backlog for a while, and I figured why not knock these bad boys off. The first Call of Juarez, though, I don't think has aged particularly well, per se. It has nice elements into it, switching between two protagonists who offer different types of gameplay and have their own unique abilities. But ultimately, it feels a bit clunky, and shockingly, I don't think ran as well as I thought it was going to. It's over pretty quick, though, in like 9-ish or 7-ish hours, but in the end, though, it's kind of a frustrating game itself, actually, compared to its later games, but we'll talk about those when we get to them. Now, finally, after resurfacing this game, I resurfaced it once because it didn't even load in my PlayStation 2, and then I had to resurface it again, but it failed. Then I resurfaced it for 20 seconds in my JFJ, and it finally worked. Naruto Uzumaki Chronicles 2. Uzumaki Chronicles 2 is a sequel to the first that has more content, isn't completely stripped out, has an original story of sorts, and I think is generally less monotonous and is more fun and more rewarding to play than the previous game, Uzumaki Chronicles 1. It also ditches the realistic sort of artist style that some of the first game was going for with some of the cutscenes, and goes to your more traditional looking stuff, and actually it doubles down more on cell shading, so it does look better actually. Mission mode is more rewarding than in the first game. You can use the puzzle thing here to fit pieces in more effectively. You can actually have more characters now that function as actual characters. I should probably talk about both of them, but on the whole, Uzumaki Chronicles, I should review Uzumaki Chronicles 2 separately, but on the whole, the second game is better than the first game, and yeah, if you only play Uzumaki Chronicles 2, don't fret too much, you might not be missing much. Back to the Call of Juarez games, though. We're going to Call of Juarez Bound in Blood. Bound in Blood is a prequel that takes place years before the events of the first game, and I do think it provides more backstory for one of the key characters that were in the first one that you play as. And yeah, I feel like it's a more well-rounded game compared to the first. Yeah, Ray McCall basically is who it was. And then you also can play as his brother, Thomas, as well in certain bits. Each of them have their own different abilities as well. Each of them also have their own style part. Well, they control kind of the same, but they play with slight subtle differences that make them stand out. It looks better, has a better story, and although a bit more frustrating in parts here, it still is pretty damn enjoyable, although the showdown segments are not particularly great. And even then, there's a serious pain in the ass here compared to the first game where they were relatively simple. I get wanting to make them a little bit more simple than just flicking your mouse up to draw, but seriously, could they have not come up with a better way, Techland? Oh well. I don't even think Bound in Blood is the best game in the franchise. That honor goes to the next game that we're going to talk about, Call of Juarez Gunslinger. Gunslinger completely disregards any continuity between the previous two games, much like the Cartel, but unlike the Cartel, it brings it back to its roots. Gunslinger brings it back to its Wild West roots, and really is basically Call of Juarez what Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon was to Far Cry 3. An exaggerated archetype of the game set in a different somewhat universe. Well, not really, because it's Wild West still. The good thing about it is it's very way more arcade-like compared to the other games, so you can really go crazier with it. You have different skill paths as well that will set you up for different upgrades as well. And while there are some showdown improvements, there's still a pain in the ass to deal with. But on the whole, I think Gunslinger is the best Call of Juarez game in the entire franchise. It's also not particularly long, as it was originally made as a downloadable only game, actually, on Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network and Steam. But yeah, Gunslinger is pretty good, the best game of the bunch, and if you only play one Call of Juarez game, play Gunslinger. And to close off the month of November, we get Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. I've been trying to get this on the 360 so I could get missing Tony Hawk games, but it took me a while to get a hold of this one for a decent price, but eventually I did, and I'm glad I did because I really like it. I don't know if I'd say I like it more than Tony Hawk's Underground 1 and 2, but for what this game does offer, it is a fun game, basically, that keeps what the previous games did right, but also still doubling down in the story direction, like Underground 1 and 2, and create a skater mode as well. And it has a lot of new interesting things you can do. You can even do BMX stuff in it as well. It probably is a tad bit easier compared to the past games, but it is still pretty good on the whole. And if you do like this game, if you do like previous Tony Hawk games, and you haven't played this, well, that would be kind of a shock, but you should. And if you want another one to jump into, yeah. The 360 version is kind of hovering in that $25 range, which I got currently. One of my local shops had it for about $35, which I still think is too much, but even then, just try to get it for a decent price. Or if you don't mind getting the other versions. Truth be told, the 360 version is only like a slight upgrade, as it was a launch title for the system, but it really didn't do anything to stand out look-wise, graphic-wise, from other 360 titles. And the D-pad is kind of worse on that version, but should you still want to go for it, be my guest. I think you will still probably enjoy it one way or another. And last but not least, here we are, the final month of the year, December. December, unfortunately, always feels like you have to hold back because of finals and other things like that, but for the most part, I still beat things I wanted to beat, starting with the original Burnout. Now, I had never beaten the original Burnout, but still feeling that kick from revenge, I went ahead and played through the original, and it's aged the worst out of all of them. And don't get me wrong, for the time the original Burnout was definitely an enjoyable game, but sadly, all of its sequels continually kept surpassing it and setting the bar higher and higher and higher. And to the point where going back to play this after playing 3 and Takedown and Revenge, even Paradise or even Burnout 2 is just, yeah, this one kind of loses out on the end and feels at the bottom of the spectrum, but we'll see soon enough. I haven't actually played Burnout 2, but I do have it sitting here, and I will be playing through it at one point or another so I can complete all of it. And the games, as well as Burnout Paradise, which I've never beaten, and Burnout Dominator, which I've never beaten. But yeah, the original Burnout's fine, but just be wary compared to its sequels. So after the original Burnout, the next game I did a proper playthrough of on Twitch was Beyond Good and Evil. I had this one sitting in my Steam backlog for a while, but it took me a while to get through it as I didn't have some time. Technical issues and final boss notwithstanding aside, Beyond Good and Evil is a very interesting game with a very unique setting, rather simple platforming, and had it not been for the 2 hiccups, although I did fix some of the technical issues, I actually would seriously go fully beyond 100% recommending this game. Well, I still would, but here's a little advice right now I'm going to warn you all about. Even though the game looks and plays well, 1, you cannot skip the cutscenes. It's a Ubisoft game. It always seems to be their games you can't skip cutscenes with. Bastards. And 2, the final boss for this thing is a major, major pain in the ass. Go watch a YouTube video of it before you do it, or look up what to do so you know what to do. Trust me, I had so much rage on that stupid boss when I streamed this game on Twitch, and it almost ruined the entire damn game for me, basically, because of how awful and painful it was with the phases, and how very unforgiving it is. How you gotta attack that thing quicker than when Han shot Greedo first. But other than that, Beyond Good and Evil is pretty good. Actually, I'd say more than pretty good. It's great. The next game I beat was Destroy All Humans. Bought this one on a sale, basically, a while back, but didn't get a chance to properly play it until after I got out, and oh boy. Despite a slight hiccup where halfway through, I had a freak accident that fucked up my save, and I had to go through the other half of the game, like from the first part of the game up until where I was before my save went kapooey. And I still enjoyed this game. It still brings the original game into a new light, basically, but fixes a lot of the needless grinding with it, basically, and still feels good in 8 hours, even though the final boss is a pain. Here's a piece of advice. Max out your Repulsotron for the Robo-Prez boss, because the final phase just launches nothing but endless missiles at you. When you have your Repulsotron maxed down and you reflect the missiles, they go back and attack the opponent Robo-Prez to the point where it becomes stupidly easy, and then you get to the actual final boss. But yeah, Destroy All Humans looks better, plays better, still has a lot of the same craziness. Here's another one I should put into the funniest games category list. You're already getting hints of what I would decide to do if I were to decide to do a best funny games of all time list. And I've got plenty of other ideas, but all in good time, people. The last one that I beat that I hadn't played in years for the year was Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider 2013, more specifically, and I forgot how good this game really was, even though it redefines Lara Croft's origin story. The game itself still has excellent gameplay, a very unique setting, takes a very dark and mature tone for the franchise that had not been seen unlike anything else, and well, definitely play it at some point if you haven't. I've had to fast track it because they've tacked on Epic Online services for no good reason into the game, and Square Enix may be the next to sell out to Epic Games, so I'm going to have to fast track this and try to get onto the grind for Rise of the Tomb Raider on PC. I don't have Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I'll get that on the next sale since I've already bought enough for the sale, but yeah, at some point I will. Kind of like this next game I bought. Oh wait, did I say next game? I meant last game. Yep, to close out the year, I played through SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. I only played a little bit of the game in my spare time, basically, the original back in the day, But eventually replaying this port here, which is the actual console game, not that PC version that came out years ago that had nothing to do with the original game. Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated is an excellent remaster that updates the graphics to make them look better. Still brings a lot of what made the original game so good, and basically brings it into a newer generation of people who missed out on this game when it first came out or didn't play it a lot like I did. Genuinely, I was shocked with a lot of the reviews it had gotten, because IGN gave the remaster like a 5 point something out of 10, basically. Yet they gave the original game like a 7 out of 10, shockingly. And needless to say, and then you have that one GameSpot reviewer who just absolutely crapped on it, basically. They just hate it, which I don't even understand. You have a game that looks better than the original, still has a lot of the same good stuff about the first game, even if it's original game, even if it's not entirely perfect. It still was probably a better platformer than some of the other crap at the time, basically, than something like Tekken the Power of Juju. Oh boy, wait till I review that one, people. But yeah, on the whole, basically, I just don't get it. Yeah, IGN gave it a 5 out of 10, the rehydrated release, yet they gave the original a 7.3. And mind you, the re-release also had a multiplayer mode, or has a multiplayer mode, and cut content from the original game. It is probably the definitive edition of it, quite frankly. If you loved it back in the day, you'll love this re-release. If you want to jump into this game directly, this re-release is fine. It's not a complex platformer or anything like that. But for what it does, simple platforming, I do think this is a pretty enjoyable game. And even if you're not directly a fan of SpongeBob and you just want a simple platformer, I argue there are far worse titles you could do than this one. So play this at some point. And that's it. That is every single game that I played that wasn't always a repeat or some other significant, but in the year of 2021. All in all, I played about 108 games in total, compared to the 68 that I had played in 2020, and this feels like a significant number compared to other stuff in the past. In fact, it's not as significant as 2017, which still seems to be my most from what I'm looking at, but I'm still pretty happy that I beat a lot of first-time things, beat older games that I never beat previously, and replayed some classics along the way, because why the heck not? Although the lone downside of it all was all those endless Wing It Cloud crap. Considering I knocked most of that off this year, don't expect a whole heck of a whole lot of that going into 2022. Hell, if anything, there's only one Wing It Cloud game left that's actual gameplay, but I don't know if I'll get to that this year or not. I guess we'll just have to see. So anyways, that's really all there is to it. I hope you guys played some interesting things throughout the year. Let me know if you did. And let me know if you played any of these games as well. And I will see you in my next review. So until then, thanks for watching and bye everybody.